The early afternoon light filtered through the tall windows of Conference Room B at Zenova Labs in Redwood City, California, lending a muted glow to the polished oak table. Silence hung in the air, broken only by the soft hum of the overhead projector. I sat at one end, heart pounding, as the words I'd dreaded finally escaped Ryan's lips. We need more agility, not another parade of security theater. His voice carried the clipped authority of someone who believed fervently in efficiency above all else. My name is Alex Chen. At 40 years old, I had spent the last 9 years as the lead security architect here, crafting and maintaining the custom defenses that protected sensitive financial data for over 300 clients. When I first joined this scrappy outfit, then called Meridian Innovations in 2015, it was just a handful of visionaries and me, fresh from a stable position at a government contractor. I left the predictable path for the promise of something bolder: security first, financial data management, long before fintech became a buzzword. 4 CEOs and 3 CTOs had come and gone during my tenure. Each change brought its own upheaval, but none as sudden or as jarring as the arrival of Ryan Sullivan 2 weeks ago. Day one, he'd declared that our existing protocols were outdated, thumbing through my quarterly security assessment with a dismissive air. "We're losing deployment velocity," he said. "Our competitors are moving twice as fast." And held my ground. "Those competitors have breaches too," I reminded him, voice measured. "Everyone has breaches. It's about resilience as much as prevention." But Ryan waved me off. "It's about recovery, not prevention," he'd said, and I could see the 6 other team leads nodding in agreement. Afraid, perhaps, to defend the old guard. They trusted me because I had a track record. Unlike enterprise solutions shoehorned in by consultants, I'd built our defenses from the ground up. Proprietary firewall rules, bespoke intrusion detection patterns, a homegrown access control system. Each component was documented, though sparingly. There had never been bandwidth approved for extensive knowledge transfer. Mia, our previous CTO, had warned, "What happens if you get hit by a bus, Alex?" We'd laughed, but the tension lingered. After that first rough meeting, Olivia from product development caught me in the corridor. Her brow was creased with concern. "You okay?" she asked softly. That word, okay, carried more weight than any technical critique. I forced a smile. "I'm fine," I said, but Olivia shook her head. "Ryan's just trying to make his mark," she reassured me. Yet 3 days later, I discovered my access to the security logging server had been restricted. The help desk claimed it was a new policy from the CTO's office. That night, under the faint glow of my desk lamp, I backed up my personal notes, process maps, architecture diagrams, threat models. No proprietary data, just my own annotations and scripts. A quiet voice in my head urged caution. "You might need this soon." The very next morning, my custom monitoring dashboard flagged 3 suspicious login attempts to our internal network. I reached out to Ethan, my most trusted direct report, only to find him as unsettled as I was. "They're merging security logs into the general IT monitoring," he said. "You know how inadequate that system is for forensic analysis." I hung up the phone and stared at the modular rack of blinking servers behind the glass wall. Each light represented hours of programming, nightly build tests, and painstaking patch reviews. I remembered the scrappy days. Employee number 26, pitching in wherever needed, covered in coffee stains and code commits. The founders had been dreamers, with more ambition than capital, deaf to risk, but obsessed with innovation. Now, over 300 people worked here, spread across 2 skyscrapers. My father always warned me to stick to government contracts. Yet even he had to admit that my equity package was looking healthy. If only the board didn't keep slashing support for the security team. "Move faster, clean it up later," they'd say, straining against my pleas for dedicated documentation time. Back in the boardroom, Ryan's gaze remained impassive. He closed his laptop with a decisive snap. "We don't have time for this," he said, gesturing expansively at the team. "Let's table the security discussion." He stood, the meeting effectively over. 2 days later, the calendar invite appeared. Security Restructuring Discussion, Alex Chen, Ryan Sullivan, Conference Room B, 2 p.m. I spent that morning reviewing every dashboard, confirming the segmentation between client data repositories was intact, verifying backup tests still passed. At 1:55 p.m., I walked into the room. Ryan sat at the head of the table, next to Rachel from Human Resources, Her poised professionalism made the air feel even colder. "Alex," Ryan said, "have a seat." I sat, steeling myself. He leaned forward. "We're restructuring the security operation model. Your role as centralized security architect is being eliminated." The words hit me like a strike to the chest. "Who will maintain the core infrastructure?" I asked, voice steady despite the churn inside me. "We're embedding security functions within each product team," Ryan explained, "then adopting cloud nano tools managed by third parties, more scalable, less dependent on tribal knowledge." The phrase echoed Mia's warning from years ago. "Tribal knowledge," he said, as though it were a disease. Rachel slid a white folder across the table. "This outlines your severance package. 2 months salary, extended benefits, accelerated equity vesting." I opened it and scanned the figures. Fair, generous, even. It was clear the decision came from far above him. Ryan stood. "We'll need your access card and credentials before you leave today. Ethan will handle any knowledge transfer for the next 2 weeks." I closed the folder. "Ethan doesn't know the entire system," I said quietly. "Nobody does, except me." Ryan's eyes flicked toward Rachel for a moment of silent counsel. "Everything's documented," he said. "We've reviewed your wikis, your code repositories." It was true, on paper. But documentation without context was a hollow shell. Years of live tweaks, emergency patches, cryptic comments, all distilled into static text. "Move faster, we'll clean it up later," they'd told me so often. I nodded, and, with deliberate calm, wrote down my domain admin, VPN, security console, and monitoring system passwords on a notepad. I pushed it across the table. Ryan accepted it, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of regret in his eyes. Or was it relief? He gave me a curt nod. "I hope you understand," he said, voice softer now. I left the building without looking back, exiting into the bright California afternoon. Outside, a wall of framed awards declared Zenova Labs' most secure financial data platform, 5 years running. Those accolades felt now like a monument to what they no longer valued. I drove in silence toward Redwood Lake, the shoreline a calm contrast to the turmoil roiling inside me. I parked and watched the water ripple under a gentle breeze, calculating how long it would take for the first serious security incident. Not if, but when. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Systems acting weird. Multiple alert triggers. Can you call?" Part of me wanted to let it crash and burn, to see how they fared without the infrastructure I'd built. But 9 years of instinct won out. I dialed Ethan. "Eastern Gateway showing unusual traffic," he whispered. "Monitoring system is flagging it, but nobody knows what to do." "Is Ryan involved?" I asked. "He's in board meetings." Silence. "Automated rule updates," he reminded me, one of my weekend hackathon projects. Now firing off raw alerts in the absence of contextual filters. "If both systems are triggering, it's not a false positive," I said, heart pounding. "Do you have access to the second-level validation logs?" "The what?" I guided him through retrieving credentials for the hidden dashboard. Credentials I hadn't included in the severance notes because I didn't expect they'd ever pay attention. He found them. "Oh shit," Ethan breathed. "Both systems are lit up like Christmas trees. You need to isolate the Eastern Gateway immediately," I urged. Moments later, I heard the relief in his voice. "I've quarantined it," he said. "The board's going to want an explanation." I stared out at the lake through my windshield. My 9 years of careful custom work reduced to a table of data points and third-party checkboxes. They thought they were streamlining, unlocking trapped value. Instead, they'd unlocked a crisis no one there knew how to contain. I switched off my engine and closed my eyes, letting the weight of what I'd built, and what they'd dismantled, settle in. The morning light was just beginning to warm the streets of Redwood City when my phone buzzed again. Ethan's terse words sliced through the pre-dawn calm, powered down the external connection, and fail over to the backup line. A knot tightened in my stomach. I'd built that failover sequence myself, an emergency measure to isolate compromised segments and reroute traffic through the hardened secondary gateway. But I knew at once Ethan wouldn't have the rights to execute it. I don't have that authorization," he stammered back. "Nobody gave me the admin rights to network hardware." Of course they hadn't. In their haste to strip me of authority, they'd neglected to transfer the full scope of my access. Without the proper credentials, Ethan couldn't reroute a single packet. You need to get Ryan or someone from senior IT, I said. He hesitated. I'll try. Can you come in just to help sort this out? I pressed my forehead against the cool window glass that overlooked my quiet suburban street. A part of me wanted nothing more than to bury myself in the anonymity of civilian life and forget the chaos I'd left behind. But another part, my professional instinct, gnawed at me like an itch I couldn't ignore. That's not my job anymore, Ethan, I replied. His voice cracked. Please, Alex, I don't know what I'm doing here. I closed my eyes. The flooded conference room, the stifled nods of my former colleagues, the emptiness of Rachel's expression. If I stepped back into that arena, I'd be feeding a fire that no longer warmed me. Call Ryan, tell him exactly what I told you, I said softly. I'll be available if he wants to contact me directly. 3 hours later, my phone lit up with an incoming call from an unrecognized number. I took a breath and answered. Alex? Ryan's voice was clipped, more strained than I'd ever heard it. We're having some security issues. I heard. My tone was neutral, professional, detached. Ethan thinks it's serious. Our regular monitoring isn't showing much. Of course not, I replied. The regular monitoring wasn't designed to catch sophisticated intrusions. A pause. Then, I've built a separate system for that, I reminded him. What do you want from me, Ryan? His sigh crackled over the line. We could use your insight. Maybe a phone consultation? I let out a bitter laugh. You want me to consult on the security system you just decided wasn't necessary? No one said security wasn't necessary, he shot back. We're restructuring how it's managed. How's that working out so far? Silence stretched. Finally, Ryan offered, We're prepared to pay your contractor rate for assistance. My smile was grim. My contractor rate is $800 per hour, 4-hour minimum, paid up front, plus a signed statement that I bear no liability for outcomes. I expected him to balk. Instead, he didn't hesitate. I'll have the paperwork drawn up. How soon can you start? I closed my eyes against the sting of his desperation. I can't, I said firmly. Ryan's breath hissed through the speaker. Why not? I've accepted another position. My severance non-compete clause prevents me from accessing your systems now that I'm joining a different financial security firm. It was a lie, one I'd crafted on the spot. In truth, I hadn't signed anything yet, and my severance specifically carved out consulting exceptions. But I knew enough to play my hand. Alex, this is serious, Ryan pressed. Yes, I agreed, it is. Then I ended the call and switched the phone off. Whatever was unfolding at Zenova Labs was no longer my burden. They had made their choice. By late morning, I found myself instinctively scanning the RSS feeds of major tech sites. Nothing about Zenova had broken the silence. Yet. I sipped cold coffee while glancing at headlines for signs of disaster. Then, at exactly 11:27 a.m., a push notification lit up my screen. Financial data firm Zenova Labs investigating potential security incident. Within minutes, my phone buzzed incessantly. 7 missed calls from Zenova extensions, 3 from Ryan, 2 from Ethan, 1 from Olivia in product, and 1 from an unknown number. Their desperation radiated through the unanswered texts and silent voicemails. I listened to them in order. Ryan's voicemail, Alex, we need to talk. Ethan's, it's bad, really bad. Someone's in the system and we can't lock them out. Olivia's, please call. That line read, for the professor on, a clipped digital message from Daniel Brooks, the CEO. Alex, this is Daniel. Whatever happened between you and Ryan, we need your help right now. Our client's data is at risk. I sat back at my kitchen table, the morning sunlight painting golden bars across my laptop keyboard. 9 years of meticulous architecture, rendered impotent in a matter of days because the people maintaining it never truly understood it. I closed my laptop. After a moment's hesitation, I dialed Daniel's number. Alex, he sighed, relief audible in his voice. We have a situation. I know, I said. What exactly is happening? Someone's in our systems, he replied. They bypassed the perimeter, then moved laterally between at least 40 client databases. 40. My stomach lurched. Has the Auto lockdown triggered? I asked. There was a pregnant silence. What? Auto lockout. My breath caught. I explained. 3 years ago, after the Threadbank breach scare, I'd built an automatic segmentation control that quarantined repositories at the first sign of suspicious lateral movement. It should isolate each client database automatically, I said, voice tight. Hold on, Daniel muttered, and I heard hurried footsteps and muffled conversation. After a long minute, he returned. Ryan says there's nothing in the documentation about an auto quarantine, because the board cut your request to properly document it. I exhaled sharply. Emergency custom solution, I reminded him. Approved as temporary, then never given full resources. Daniel cleared his throat. Yes, but the system exists somewhere. Check the emergency board minutes from August 3 years ago. A pause. Then Daniel's voice brightened. I found it. Approved emergency security measures as proposed by Chen. But no technical details. Just that, ask them to examine the configuration management database, I said. Look for any scheduled tasks on the security server jobs that run periodic verification of the quarantine module. More silence. Then, it's there, Daniel breathed, but it's disabled. I closed my eyes and pictured the moment. The restructuring meeting, decisions made with buzzwords instead of data, checkboxes instead of code. They disabled it as part of the consolidation, I said. It wasn't because it failed. It was intentionally turned off. Outside, the sun had climbed higher, warming the street beyond my window. Inside, I felt hollow. They had dismantled every piece of the system without understanding how the components interlocked. Now they were paying the price. That afternoon, as Zenova's nightmare dominated the cybersecurity blogs, I received a LinkedIn ping from Samantha Cole. The CTO of Sentinel Security Group. Heard you might be available. We should talk. Sentinel was the pinnacle of enterprise security consulting. Elite, rigorous, and fiercely protective of its reputation. I'd long admired their incident response playbooks and the crisp, decisive way they handled breaches for Fortune 500 firms. Now, they were reaching out to me. We met 2 hours later at Mariner's Perch, a tiny cafe overlooking Pike Place Market. Samantha's presence was calm yet formidable, her tailored blazer and minimalist jewelry signaling that she didn't waste time on frills. Alex, she began after the curt nod of greeting, I'm sorry about what's happening at Zenova. I don't know all the details, I said, stirring my latte. I'm not there anymore. She watched me intently. Word travels fast in our circles. Your name's on everyone's lips, the architect who saw the compromises coming. I gave a half smile. Until now. From what I've gathered, she continued, the breach occurred after significant changes to your architecture. Changes you didn't implement. I didn't ask how she knew. The security community was a tight web, and news of Zenova's collapse was a viral wildfire. We're expanding our financial practice, Samantha said, leaning forward. We need someone who's built bespoke systems from scratch, someone who understands the fragility of custom controls. She slid an envelope across the table. This is a formal offer. Double your previous base salary, equity in our new joint venture fund, and a team of 8 engineers reporting directly to you. I picked up the paper, my pulse ticking louder. It was generosity as ever. But the offer came with urgency. I should mention, I said, my severance includes a non-compete. Samantha's expression softened. Our legal has reviewed the standard Zenova clauses. Your non-compete only bars you from competing financial data services, not from security consulting. In fact, Sentinel could become a vendor to Zenova in the aftermath. Her words unknotted something in me. I nodded slowly. Tell me where you need me. That evening, as I signed the final page of Sentinel's offer letter in my home office, my phone rang once more. The Zenova main switchboard number appeared. Alex? Olivia's voice was tight. Have you seen the headlines? I opened my browser and saw them instantly. Zenova Labs confirms major data breach, client data compromised. Zenova stock plummets 28% after security failure. Financial services industry shaken by Zenova catastrophe. How bad? I asked softly. 40 client databases accessed. Olivia replied, her voice cracking. IT scrambled. They've called in an external firm, but none of them knows the architecture. They'll figure it out eventually, but not before more damage is done. A wave of sorrow washed over me. Not for the company that sacked me, but for every client whose trust I'd helped build, and who were now vulnerable because no one knew how to maintain the defenses I'd layered so carefully. I'm sorry, I whispered, and meant it. It's not your fault, Olivia said. You tried to warn them. The next morning, I stepped into Sentinel's downtown Seattle office for the first time. The lobby was all glass and pale oak, every line and angle whispering precision and control. Within an hour, I was unpacking new hardware on a sleek white desk, surrounded by 8 eager engineers, who looked at me as though I were a long-lost general returning to lead them into battle. My first assignment: architect a post-breach recovery framework for financial institutions. A blueprint for how to rebuild trust, restore segmented data environments, and harden defenses against the very kinds of ad hoc compromises Zenova's board had championed. That evening, as dusk settled over the city, my phone buzzed with one last text from Daniel Brooks. The board would like to discuss bringing you back. Name your terms. I stared at the message, finger hovering over the keys. Some bridges, once burned, illuminate the path ahead far more clearly than any guide could. I hit send on my laptop just as the late afternoon light stretched across Sentinel's open-plan office. My fingers lingered on the keys for a moment before I closed the lid. In the to field was Samantha's address. The subject line read, "Preventing the next Zenova." Inside, I'd laid out the first pass of our post-incident recovery framework, an exhaustive playbook for rebuilding segmented architectures, restoring client confidence, and hardening defenses against advanced persistent threats. It felt almost perversely satisfying to warn another organization how not to repeat Zenova's mistakes. A week later, as I was settling into my new commute routine, coffee at the corner cafe, then the light rail into downtown Seattle, Bloomberg broke the story. The dismantling of Zenova, how cost-cutting compromised security. Their investigative piece left no doubt who'd been at fault. Reporters had obtained internal emails showing Ryan Sullivan personally ordering the deactivation of critical firewall rules, advocating for reinterpreted compliance standards, and slashing scheduled penetration tests in the name of deployment velocity. Screenshots of board meeting minutes revealed that my repeated requests for quarter after quarter for a proper documentation budget and a formal knowledge transfer process were summarily labeled non-essential administrative overhead and killed 6 times in a row. The article quoted Ethan, anonymously of course, recalling how the custom IDS patterns I'd written were simply turned off, how the emergency quarantine scripts I'd built after the Thread Bank scare were disabled as part of system consolidation. He described the emotional moment when he'd called me in a panic and found himself without the admin rights to power cycle a single switch. That same day, 3 of Zenova's largest clients, each handling billions in assets, issued public statements terminating their contracts. Their CEOs cited irreconcilable concerns about data governance and a complete loss of trust. It was as if the entire financial sector had drawn a line in the sand. Anyone who cut corners on security would be paying tuition with blood rather than money. Watching the Bloomberg live blog tick over, I didn't need to glower at my phone to know the latest price action. Within hours, Zenova's stock had hemorrhaged nearly 32% in pre-market trading. But more telling than the market charts were the changes on LinkedIn. For days, I refreshed the platform to see hundreds of Zenova employees updating their titles, signaling the great exodus. A handful even wrote, "seeking new opportunities," while others quietly shifted to competitor firms. Ryan Sullivan's own profile flickered like a dying star. His title changed from Chief Technology Officer, Zenova Labs, to the more nebulous Strategic Technology Advisor, with no corporate affiliation. His tenure had lasted under 3 months. Meanwhile, at Sentinel, our phones never stopped ringing. Many were security leads from former Zenova clients, their voices tight with fatigue and relief in equal measure. During one conference call, the CIO of a mid-tier investment firm asked, "Were you the architect behind Zenova's platform?" I answered simply, "Yes." There was a beat of silence, then, "That explains why you're our first call." I felt no triumph in that admission, only a heavy pang of regret for the hundreds of people whose livelihoods had been tethered to the company I once called home. Yet even amid the fallout, there was a quiet vindication. I realized that security is never optional. It's the foundation upon which trust, reputation, and business continuity rest. As Sentinel's financial security practice expanded, we onboarded wave after wave of former Zenova customers, each bringing their own nightmares and bruised confidence. The majority wanted a do-overs with the same architecture we'd built, but managed properly this time. Rigorous documentation, clear operational playbooks, and real-time drills for incident response. Former colleagues joined our ranks too, Ethan as senior security engineer, Olivia leading client communications, and a half-dozen others selected for their intimate knowledge of Zenova's now infamous custom controls. By month's end, Zenova itself had been acquired for barely a tenth of its former valuation. A private equity firm scooped up its patents and client lists, stripping away the name and tucking the remnants into a shell company. The brand was retired, its fate sealed as a cautionary tale in business schools and security conferences alike. Whenever I taught a guest lecture or moderated a panel, I'd see Zenova's collapse referenced on slide decks and in case studies, each emphasizing the same lesson. Don't let your boards confuse speed with security. 6 months after the breach, I bumped into Daniel Brooks, Zenova's former CEO, at an industry conference in Vancouver. We found ourselves alone in a mirrored hotel bar late one evening. He raised his glass in a quiet salute. "No hard feelings?" he asked, voice low, as though the reverberations of that disaster still haunted him. I met his gaze. "None," I said without hesitation. He nodded, eyes shadowed. "Business decisions have consequences, some more than others." "For what it's worth," I replied, "I fought against those changes." He managed a rueful grin. "I know. I read Bloomberg." He drained his drink and leaned closer. "You know the real irony?" I shook my head. "We're paying Sentinel 3 times your old Zenova salary now, just to keep the rest of our clients from fleeing." I felt the weight of that confession settle like stones in my gut. "The cost of security always gets paid," I said quietly, "either up front or after the fact." He stood, nodded once, and excused himself. I watched him merge back into the crowd. Another executive undone by a desire for unchecked velocity. Back in Seattle the following Monday, I walked into Sentinel's office to find Samantha already waiting at my desk. In her hand was a crumpled email printout. Vertifine, the latest fintech darling, had suffered a weekend security incident. Their CISO was calling in every favor to triage an intrusion that had stalled operations and rattled investors. Samantha looked up, brows raised. "Want to lead the response?" I shook my head, letting a slow grin spread across my face. "No," I said. "Send the junior team. They need the experience." My new team cheered at the news. Real-world exposure to incident containment and forensic triage is the fastest teacher in our field. I spent the afternoon finalizing our revamped client onboarding documentation, nearly 200 pages of clear, comprehensive guidelines, diagrams annotated with failure points, decision trees for escalation, and checklists for both red team drills and compliance audits. On the cover page, in bold, "Understanding the full security architecture, the foundation of trust." Every section of that handbook embodied the lessons Zenova had taught me. Security is not an obstacle to agility. It is its very bedrock. That evening, I sat by the window in my apartment, the skyline of Seattle outlined against the purple dusk. I thought of my father's words, spoken when I was fresh out of college and weighing a stable government contract position against the unknowns of startup life. Job security isn't about where you work. It's about being the person who sees disasters coming before anyone else. I had rolled my eyes then. The advice felt abstract. Now, after watching the dominoes of Zenova's collapse, I understood fully. To be indispensable in security, you don't just build walls. You anticipate how they might be breached, who might exploit their seams, and how to close that gap before anyone even notices it's open. On my desk lay my open notebook, where in the margin I'd scribbled the final line of our onboarding guide. Commit to understanding every layer, document every nuance, and never assume that tomorrow's needs mirror today's assumptions. I closed the book gently. The future of cybersecurity would demand both speed and steadfastness, but above all, it would require integrity. The discipline to put protection first, not just because it's our job, but because it's the only way to truly safeguard the organizations and people we serve.